Well, a popular narrative is that young people are liberal and they're getting more liberal, and liberals are very happy with themselves. But what if that was fake news? And what is the effect of this so called liberalism? Let's check it out. So, according to a report in The Hill 2 years ago, 12th grade boys, which is year 13 here, so it's about 17 to 18-year-olds for us oldies, think seventh formers, those boys are nearly twice as likely to identify as conservative versus liberal, according to a respected federal survey of American youth. Now, in annual surveys over the last 3 years, roughly one quarter, between 26 and 23% of high school seniors self-identified as conservative or very conservative on the Monitoring the Future survey. It's a scholarly endeavour that dates back to the 70s. Only 13% of boys identified as liberal or very liberal in those last 3 years. And the figures represent a striking shift in the political views of boys. As recently as the late 2000s, liberal boys occasionally outnumbered conservatives. And you can see that where the blue line is just above the red briefly, and also in 2009. Now, here's what a psychotherapist told Fox News at the time.
I mean, you look at everything, all the messaging in society, it's sort of like, everything is about advancing women, minorities, and so forth. And young men, young boys are kind of being left out. They're sort of being left behind. Then you have politicians out there saying, like, the number one problem in America is white men and things of that nature. So I think young, 12th grade boys are kind of seeing through this. And then you take away, the pickup trucks. I just saw a story about that. Like they want to get rid of pickup trucks. And if you go down south, probably the majority of senior boys that drive are driving pickup trucks. So it's sort of like, all right, we're creating this idea that if you're a male, that there's something wrong with that and that you're bad.
Well, yeah, it seems that high school boys do not want to be considered liberal. Liberal identifying boys have been an ever-falling trend. However, since the study's first numbers in 1975 are at 25%. However, girls are different. The share of 12th grade girls who identified as liberal rose from 19% in 2012 to 30% in 2022. Only 12% of girls identified as conservative in the last year's survey administered by the University of Michigan. Liberalism in senior girls has skyrocketed, whereas conservative identifying girls has dropped. Now, it's important to note that more than 40% responded to the liberal conservative question on the survey saying none of the above or I don't know. Either they haven't really thought about it, don't care, or genuinely like parts of both conservatism and liberalism. I suspect they just don't want to label themselves. But since 2016, however, the trend towards conservatism for high school boys has grown considerably. High school girls, on the other hand, have moved in the other direction. But young women too are trending liberal. Women aged 18 to 29 are more likely to identify as liberal now than at any time in the past 2 decades. This is according to a Gallup survey last year, or 2 years ago. Young women almost twice as likely as young men to claim the liberal tag, a widening gender gap in political beliefs. But you can see there the political leanings of young men have changed little over the past 2 decades in this survey. Last year, 31% said they are conservative, 24% is liberal, and 43% identified as moderate, so they're neither liberal or conservative. Now, Daily Wire, when they did a report of this, they said, as boys in high schools shift to the right, fewer young men are graduating from America's universities, which many conservatives believe have become beacons of leftist ideology. In the 2018-2019 academic year, just 74 men received a bachelor's degree for every 100 women who completed their program. So in other words, boys aren't being indoctrinated in leftist ideas in academia and universities. Now, before you despair about what is happening to our younger women, check out this story from last year in June, and remember that it's all ages. The Gallup survey released Thursday, so this is last year, showed 38% of respondents said they are conservative or very conservative on social issues, an increase from the 33% who said so last year. The percentage who now say they are liberal or very liberal on these issues dropped from 33% last year to 29%. So this is all ages. So social conservatives have increased from 30 to 38% in the past 2 years. Social liberals have dropped from 34 to just 29% in the last 2 years. But here's the interesting bit, and I shared this as part of my opening remarks at the Forum on the Family 2 years ago. Pew Research found that young liberal women, followed by young liberal men on the right of the graph, were far more likely to have been diagnosed with a mental health issue than a young conservative female or male, shown on the left. And 18 to 29 and 30 to 49 are the left half of each line. So yeah, it goes up in ages. Now, commentators such as the Disinformation Project and other activists immediately blame phobias, bigotry, and right-wing fundamentalism for the mental health of liberals not being so good. But the research amongst young people from the same Monitoring the Future study of students shows clearly that the harms started rising with a social liberal as president, which was Obama, gay marriage being legalized, and the White House being lit up in the new cultural religion. So that argument simply doesn't stack up. In fact, here's another one. Here's the more recent data from that same study through to 2021. This was reported in 2023. Self-derogation is inner conflict, anxiety, and depression. It's most likely in liberal girls, followed by liberal boys, least likely in those who identify as social conservatives. And you'll see that increase began around 2009, 2010, when you had a very liberal president. And, you know, the LGBT messaging was being pushed strongly. But as I shared at the forum, progressivism or liberalism is secular. There's no God, there's no moral standard, narcissism and hedonism is rife. I mean, just watch any secular music video to see that. And with no God, it's about a need for recognition and admiration. Pleasure, especially sexual pleasure, is the highest good. I mean, does that sound familiar? Therefore, with no God and biblical truth, progressivism is depressing because it's so confusing. I mean, 112 genders to choose from, 200 plus sexualities. Yeah. Now, this earlier research has recently been backed up, and that's why I'm talking about it in this episode. According to EV magazine this month, they had this article. According to the 2024 American Family Survey, young liberal women are significantly less likely to report life satisfaction compared to their conservative peers. The numbers don't lie. Findings reveal that 37% of conservative women and 28% of moderate women aged 18 to 40 report being completely satisfied with their lives. However, for liberal women, that number shrinks to just 12%. So 37% for conservative women, 12% for liberal. Liberal women are almost 3 times more likely than conservative women to experience loneliness multiple times a week, about 29% compared to 11%. Brad Wilcox, a social professor at the University of Virginia, a fellow at the Institute for Family Studies, and who we've interviewed on Family Matters, told Fox Digital, quote, "We've seen in the research that conservative women tend to be more likely to embrace a sense of agency and have the sense that they are not in any way the victim of large structural realities or forces." He said they're also less likely to catastrophize about public events and concerns and more likely to think of themselves as captains of their own fate. And this stat was interesting. 40% of liberal women reported being single, while 31% were married. Among conservative women, 33% reported being single, while a more sizable 51% were married. Conservative women again took the lead for religious attendance, with over half reporting attending church weekly compared to just 12% of liberal women. So the Institute for Family Studies conclude that these two factors, marriage and church attendance, account for about half of the happiness gap between liberal and conservative women. Liberal young women are less likely to be integrated into core American institutions, marriage and religion, that lend meaning, direction, and a sense of solidarity to women's lives. So, fascinating article just come out. And basically it's saying that if you want to improve your mental health, get married, go to church, become a social conservative. It's pretty simple. But even New Zealand commentators and academics are observing this trend. In fact, just this morning, this very disturbing article, The Rise of Tradwife Movement Reflects Youth Shift to Conservative Values. It's worth reading a bit of it. Yeah, okay, I will. A few years ago, commentators and analysts often raised the idea of a youthquake, young, first-time left-leaning voters coming in and shaking up the political landscape. It was after such events as the school strikes for climate and the rise of politicians, including Jacinda Ardern and the US's Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, and Chloe Schwarbrick as well. But recently, there's been a shift to more conservative views amongst our younger voters. A yearning for the good old days has seen trends such as tradwives and a return to traditional family values skyrocket online. According to a Harvard youth poll, the US's youngest voters, those aged 18 to 24, say they're more conservative than the cohort that's just a bit older, as I showed you in that earlier research. The younger generation of men is more likely to identify as conservative than liberal, a new trend. And it's not just in the US, it's also in the UK. Auckland University of Technology senior lecturer in communication studies, Christina Vogels, told the New Zealand Herald she's not surprised, but she's alarmed. She said, "I've done some work on young women and this growing trend towards the conservative and the far right. And it matches with what's happening with young men." And talks about Jordan Peterson's social media influences and promoting real masculinity. She says, "We last had a men's liberation movement in the 80s where it was really popular, this idea of returning to a conservative masculinity identity." I mean, you hear a lot about toxic masculinity. No, masculinity, if it's proper masculinity, is good masculinity. She says, "What we are seeing at the moment is it being complemented by a rise in young women taking on conservative gender roles. We see this particularly through the tradwife movement, which dovetails with the far-right women's movement," she said. The tradwife movement has gained increasing popularity since 2020 and depicts a woman who believes in and practices traditional gender roles and marriage. Now, our academic from AUT is hopeful history will repeat itself and we will come out of this. The only thing that is a concern is what's happening with the far-right movement, because what we're seeing in America is a new state of political play. This post-democratic America is something that we haven't seen before in the Western world in this space. Well, heavens above, somebody called the Disinformation Project. Please, help. Oh, wait, they've been disestablished. That's right, they were shut down for peddling disinformation. But actually, talking about this, you know, I've just got to play this clip from a documentary about the Disinformation Project and featuring them telling us all that the real risk to the fabric of society is tradwives. Now, to the woman watching, please note, according to the experts, if you're a tradwife, you know, traditional role in marriage, believe that a woman does not lose anything by choosing to stay at home and believes they can support their family needs better. If you're a tradwife and you're white, Christian, if you're into cooking with your children, if you're on Instagram or Pinterest, interior design, knitting, children's clothing, healthy food for children, then you're being drawn into white nationalist ideas. You are the problem. Have a watch.
Want to make jelly on a budget? Grab some lilac.
You can draw people in lots of different places. And each of the platforms are used in different ways.
Hello, friends. As you can see, I'm working on my would-be bag.
What is known internationally as the kind of tradwife set of viewpoints, which is white, Christian, a lot of pseudo-Celtic, pseudo-Nordic ideologies behind it. They use Pinterest and Instagram to draw in other women who are interested in interior design, children's clothing, knitting, healthy food for children. And it does draw people in towards a set of white nationalist ideas. I mean, it's relatively easy to see. If you see a very beautiful, fair-skinned, blonde or red-haired child with beautiful braiding in her hair and some flowers, just step back a little bit.
That is a classic. I never get sick of watching that one. Well, the tradwife movement is making a comeback because conservative values, getting married, going to church, surprise, surprise, makes you happy and fulfilled. Just one more thing before I go. To all the women watching, adult human females, you will appreciate this research from 2 years ago. And it says this: conservative women are perceived as both prettier and happier than left-wing women, at least according to artificial intelligence, AI. An AI model gave conservative women high attractiveness scores according to a study published in the journal Scientific Reports, which is owned by Nature magazine. The study said for females, though not males, high attractiveness scores were found amongst those the model identified as likely to be conservative. The researchers added that these results are credible since previous research using human raters rather than AI has also highlighted a link between attractiveness and conservatism. The researchers also observed that an expression of contempt was related to a predicted probability of left-wing ideology. We also found that expressing happiness is associated with conservatism for both genders, the researchers wrote. Well, if you want proof that the study is correct, well, I'm happy, but definitely not pretty. It goes on, a 2022 survey found that conservative women are much more likely to be completely satisfied with their lives than liberal women. About 31% of conservative women aged 18 to 55 are completely satisfied with their lives, but just 16% of liberal women, according to the American Family Survey, which was earlier 2022. The study also found that conservative women are 24% more likely to be happy with their family life. Well, that's really gonna blow the disinformation unit, isn't it? Bottom line, team, if you want to be healthier, happier, and have better mental health, become a social conservative. Welcome aboard.